My name is Benjamin Akapo. It's another installment of AM Exclusive. It's always glad going to different places to bring you these exclusive conversations. And today I'm glad to be here. Where am I? It's the residence of the UK High Commissioner. This is a place where they've all been, huh? John Benjamin and all of them. But today I'm sitting here with the current UK High Commissioner, Harriet Thompson. Interestingly, it's my first conversation with her, so I'm going to make the most of it. But for you, welcome aboard. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you finally.
Pleasure to be here. So I'm saying welcome to them, but you're welcoming me, right?
I am
First time
welcoming
in your building. So let's kick it off with what your experience has been like so far over these last few years serving in Ghana. I want to know everything.
Yeah.
Food you like, food you don't like, and everything in between. What's the ambassadorial situation?
Interesting that you started with food. We could go down that track and literally be speaking for the full hour. So let me limit myself. So, I mean, you won't be surprised to hear the whole family loves kelewele. Red and kelewele is a staple.
Oh.
I think that I am doing well because when I first arrived in Ghana, I would very frequently get the words otumfo and omotor muddled up. And now I can say them correctly in the right place. So omotor and groundnut soup is another favorite. We could go on with foods. But yeah, it's been a real privilege doing the job as well. The relationship between Ghana and the UK, yes, it's deep, it's historic, but it's also very modern. It's very broad, it's very forward focused. And the number of times I will come back from an engagement, a conversation with somebody and think, my gosh, it's a real privilege to do this role.
And in terms of, people often talk about Ghanaian hospitality. It's not all rosy, so I don't expect you to feign it, but what has the reception been like from governments and when you're on the street, you know, walking, ordinary Joes and Janes meet you? What's the experience like?
So, I mean, walking around, it's always fascinating to see the things that are unique to Ghana, the things obviously that are different from the UK, and becoming familiar with that is one of the privileges of the role. I find that people don't bat an eyelid on the whole, apart from actually at the airport, I can tend to get recognised, and then I'm always surprised that people know who the British High Commissioner is. So that's been really interesting. And from government, from civil society, from leaders in various walks of life, I've been really touched by the openness, the willingness to have, the desire to have a relationship. Again, is something that makes this job really special.
One of the things you've been doing here in Ghana is to highlight, you know, the work of the UK in Ghana, what collaborations exist. But another major thing is to talk about the King's birthday party, which is happening on the 14th of November. But for us in Ghana, for the Commission and friends of the Commission, it's taking place today, the 7th of November. Tell us a bit about the birthday party and why it's so relevant, you know, to the UK and its relations with other members of the Commonwealth.
Sure. So the King's birthday party, obviously we're celebrating our King, but because we're celebrating here in Ghana, it's an opportunity for us to celebrate the UK-Ghana relationship. It's a really special relationship. The people connections, there are 110,000 Ghanaians living in the UK, far more than that when you count also people with Ghanaian heritage. There are many people with dual nationality, both living in Ghana and living in the UK, people that travel for work, people that travel for study, for business, for leisure. So the people connections are strong. Everybody in Ghana seems to have an opinion or a connection with the UK. And we're aligned on so many issues as well. When it comes to the focus on economic growth, for example, it's a top priority for both of our governments. When it comes to recognition of the importance of tackling climate change, our governments agree. When it comes to international issues, for example, Russia's invasion of Ukraine or the need to reform the international financial architecture, our governments are aligned. So on very many issues, there's huge scope for collaboration between the UK and Ghana. And it's not just government to government, it's institution to institution, it's individual to individual, it's private company to private company. So a very special set of issues for us to celebrate and collaborate on.
How is this going to enhance our relationship, UK-Ghana relationships? Or partnership, I should put it that way.
So the King's birthday party is an opportunity for us to strengthen our relationships with our partners. There's an opportunity for us to thank our partners for the collaboration that we've enjoyed to date. And we'll be celebrating particularly this year youth as the theme for our King's birthday party. It's a theme that the King has long championed, empowering youth, not just in the UK but around the world, including here in Ghana through the King's Trust, which used to be known as the Prince's Trust, the King's Trust International. And it's a theme that he will be championing in his role as head of the Commonwealth as well. So you'll see at the King's birthday party young chefs, for example, who've collaborated with the resident chefs to create a unique UK-Ghana fusion menu. We'll have a fashion show by Ghanaian fashion designers who are promoting sustainable fashion. We've got young musicians performing, we've got young dancers performing. So we're really trying to celebrate everything that's good about Ghanaian youth.
Well, that's interesting. I do know the King, King Charles III, has an affinity for the youth, which is a good thing. If you look at Africa's burgeoning population by 2050, the percentage, even now, the percentage of youth in there. But the question is, why? Why the youth? Why this affinity for the youth? And how does it reflect as far as the celebration is concerned?
So the King's focus on the youth is all about empowering young people. He recognised long ago that there are young people who are being left behind, who are missing out on life's chances and opportunities. And that's what prompted him to set up the Prince's Trust International. Prince's Trust in the UK, Prince's Trust International around the world, including here in Ghana. When you look at the picture in Ghana, we know how young Ghana's population is. When you look at the picture in the Commonwealth as a whole, over 60% of the Commonwealth, people living in Commonwealth countries, are below the age of 30. That creates huge opportunity, but in order to realise that opportunity, we may need to make really deliberate strides to make sure that young people really are getting those opportunities. So for example, here in Ghana, we have been working for a long time with the Education Ministry to support reform of Ghana's education system, the curriculum, including the focus on TVET. Through British Council, we are working with Government of Ghana and with Ghanaian universities, Ghanaian institutions, to make sure that the curriculum they're teaching is what the private sector, what the employers need. It's really important that people are coming out of Ghana's universities not just able to take on employment, for example, in the public sector, but able to create the jobs that Ghana needs that are going to grow the economy and really harness the impact that Ghana's young population can bring to the country.
Well, that's interesting, and we've been talking about this proposed new curriculum or curricula for senior high schools, for example. Was the UK a partner as far as those ideas were concerned? I mean, we're talking robotics, we're talking more languages being added to the skill sets of these people, whether they're in the sciences or general arts or business, etc. Is that an area of interest? Is that something you contributed to in any way?
So we do. I mean, we have a long-standing and ongoing partnership with the Ministry of Education, and we talk with them, I mean, on an ongoing basis about changes that they're making in the system, and we try to support those changes. So, for example, setting up the TVET unit and the complementary curriculum unit as part of Ghana's education system. Those are things that we've supported. But every country needs to constantly check what it's teaching its children and make sure that we're equipping them for jobs that we can't imagine. When people who are starting school today finish high school or even finish university or whatever tertiary education they do, some of them will be moving into jobs that do not exist today, and we need to expand their minds. We need to get them ready for those new worlds. So teaching them to learn and continue to learn is, I think, a challenge for education systems around the world, and I'm really pleased with the partnership that we have with Ministry of Education here in Ghana.
Right. Now that we're talking education, I'm taking a little bit of a detour. I realized that sometime from last year into this year, there was talk, I believe, under Rishi Sunak, some changes that purportedly were going to happen so that students in the UK from Ghana and other countries wouldn't necessarily be able to bring, other parties, relatives, wives, and all of that. I have friends in the UK, Ghanaians, who called and said, this is what is happening now. But even apart from that, there have also been situations where Ghanaian students in the UK have been stranded, students who are on scholarship, and yet when the payments don't come, then it becomes, a crisis. And I think in recent times, some of them had their visas revoked. Once the school no longer, you become persona non grata, so to speak, then things follow through. How can such people be helped better to ensure that they don't get stranded? I'm not blaming your government for this, but how can they be helped so that the experience is better?
So the advice I give usually when people ask me about anything to do with visas is to go to the website, gov.uk website, to check the rules and then to stick to the rules. It holds true when you're making a visa application. We receive thousands, you can imagine thousands. I think we granted 67,000 visas last year. We grant 7 out of 10 applications.
7 out of 10.
There's an 85% satisfaction rate with the service that people receive. But things tend to go wrong when people don't follow the instructions on the website. So maybe the money is meant to be in your bank account 28 days before your application, and it's only been in for 10 days before the application. Just follow the process. And the same when you're in the country, you know what the rules are that apply to your visa. Make sure you stick to those rules. On the immigration, the rules...
Unfortunately, though, my apologies, these students on scholarship, and I'm speaking specifically about them because then you know that your government is going to be paying. I mean, the Ghanaian government is going to be footing the bills, or there's an establishment in Ghana, the Scholarship Secretariat or wherever, supposed to pay your tuition fees, among others. If these don't come through, you can't really put the blame on the student, can you?
No, I mean, it's not to blame the student. In situations like that, it's not the student's fault, but the rules, the immigration rules still apply, and the student then needs to follow the immigration rules. But I did want to pick up on the other comment that you made about partners and families accompanying students. Research students, PhD students, they are still able to have their families with them, there's partners with them. We had a changeover in government in July, and our current government is reviewing all of the package of rules that go around our immigration process, whether it's for students or whoever else is coming to the UK. Our government in the UK is absolutely focused on economic growth, and the value that people coming from outside of the UK can bring to the British economy is very well recognised. And so making sure that we are able to take advantage of people who want to come study in the UK, people who want to contribute to the UK's economy through their endeavours after their study is something that we need to make sure we do within the bounds of the immigration rules and system.
Well, the Americans have now voted, but let's stay on the trajectory of youth, because a chunk of those going to vote in the Ghanaian election on December the 7th is youthful, or we're talking about young people. In respect of this conversation we're having, how is the UK interfacing with the government of Ghana, institutions like the Electoral Commission, among others, to ensure free, transparent, peaceful elections in Ghana?
Yeah, so Ghana clearly holds its democracy very dear. That's a message that's come through loud and clear in the years that I've been here, as I've travelled around the country. Ghana is proud of its democracy, its democratic tradition, the peaceful transfers of power that you've enjoyed. And the UK, like Ghana, really wants to see this coming election be another example of this. Democracy is not all about elections, so we work with organisations like civil society, like the Electoral Commission, in advance of, in between elections, not just when it comes to sort of the 6-month lead up. You won't be surprised to hear that we've been asking lots of questions of lots of people about how they see these elections going, about the preparations for the elections, about some of the issues that are being raised in the press around preparations. And we take a balanced approach, of course. The UK has got no position on who it wants to see victorious in these elections, but it is really important that it's a good, strong process. As you say, it needs to be credible, transparent, inclusive and peaceful, most importantly. And if Ghana succeeds in delivering a process like that in the same way that it has done since the beginning of this republic, then we'll have another legitimate government in power, and I'm sure the transition will be smooth, and the UK government will remain committed to our relationship with Ghana, working with whomever wins the elections on the 7th of December.
How then is the UK, how specifically is the UK enhancing, adding on, partnering Ghana, not just the government, but institutions like the Electoral Commission, in terms of governance and ensuring that the elections are what we all hope they will be?
Yeah. One of the most important things I think we're doing is working with organisations like CDD, the Centre for Democratic Development, CODEO, the Coalition of, what's CODEO stand? Democratic Election Observers. To support their efforts. So we are funding 1,200 domestic election observers who will be part of CODEO's,
Ghanaians?
Yeah, part of CODEO's efforts, significant efforts on election day to observe what's happening right the way across the country. We'll have our staff out as well alongside the diplomatic community. But international efforts have got to be about bolstering domestic efforts. These are Ghana's elections, and how Ghana observes what's happening, how Ghana polices the elections, how Ghana runs the elections. That's all for Ghana. So we have been working with the Electoral Commission. We have been working with CODEO and CDD. We talk regularly with the police and the security infrastructure, the military defence, with the parties. And with everybody that we talk to, what we're interested in is, I mean, primarily we're interested in what they're doing now in advance of the elections to help create an atmosphere that's conducive to peaceful, to good elections. When I talk with people who aren't directly involved in the process, voters rather than people with a role to play in running the process, I'm concerned by how many of those people see violence as an inevitability when it comes to elections. That's not to say widespread violence, it's not to say significant violence, but there does seem to be, amongst a lot of the population, an expectation that there will be some violence. And that's a real worry. It's not part of Ghana's democratic tradition, and it's not necessary. But the actions that people are taking now, the messages that people are giving now, whether deliberate or inadvertent or by mistake, all of that will help create an atmosphere that is conducive to peaceful elections, and it's really important that everyone is taking full advantage to create that peaceful atmosphere from now.
I see. And when it comes to the elections, just a quick thought. I mean, in the last elections, there were some deaths recorded in the Techiman area, among others. Everyone is trying so that such scenarios don't play themselves out within this election. But that also, in a way, had to do with the involvement of the military. What do you make of such a situation? I mean,
so
we've used them to enhance, because of the numbers of security operatives on the ground, they have more or less become a part of, security for the elections. But some also say that it is not the best of situations, because the orientation of the military is very different from the orientation of the police, for example. What is your quick thinking?
My understanding is that the position is very clear. The police have primacy when it comes to policing the elections, and they will draw in other representatives from other civilian security agencies, the prisons, for example, to increase their numbers. It's only when the police feel that they cannot get a handle on a situation that they might then decide to call in the military. It's only on that request from the police that the military would go in. And it's important that there is that fallback there, because peace is the most important thing. However, it's also important that people feel protected and not intimidated by the security presence on election day. So the military being very much in the background, there if necessary, but not visibly present until the point, unless they are actually needed. Striking that balance between reassurance and a sense of a sort of intimidation, I think is a really difficult one. But I know that the Electoral Commission for Security has been meeting regularly, and I know that it's something that's been on their minds from the conversations I've had with some of those members.
Right. The UK, among other Western countries, including the US itself with its own drastic measures, has had a problem with the smuggling of drugs into the country. In recent times there was one such attempt, and that is another thorny area in terms of relations between the UK and Ghana. What does that look like for you, and how do such actions impact Ghana-UK relations?
It's an area where we highly prize the relationship that we have with Ghana. The collaboration between the National Crime Agency of the UK and IOCO, NACOC here in Ghana is incredibly important to us, and it's seen some really significant successes. Even over the last 3 or 4 months, we've had £5 million worth of cocaine seized at Kotoko Airport. People who are about to get on a BA flight to take those drugs to the UK, sell them on the streets with all of the harm that does. We've also had, just in the last couple of weeks, 4 people sentenced for drugs smuggling, which again has been the product of that collaboration between the British agencies and the Ghanaian agencies. So yes, it's an area that we need to continue to remain vigilant about, but it's an area where that cooperation between our law enforcement agencies is really paying off.
And in terms of such security, because that it is UK security, it is Ghana security, it is intelligence sharing and all of that, but you also look at the threat from the Sahel. Unfortunately, we're surrounded by some countries who have fallen to coup d'etats, which also erodes and chips away at the democratic credentials of the sub-region. But you also look at insurgency in some of these places, and you look at Boko, for example, and the turbulence there. What is the thinking of the UK High Commission on developments, especially recently? I'm sure you've seen images, videos, and all of that. And how much more are you going to collaborate with the government of Ghana to bring some cessation to that?
So we fully agree with the government of Ghana's assessment of the situation in the region. The violence, particularly in Burkina Faso, has been escalating over the years even that I've been here, and we work closely with Ghana to support their efforts to maintain the resilience factors, I suppose, that have protected Ghana up until this point. So the strength of Ghana's armed forces, we highly prize our relationship between the two militaries in our two countries, and we're working with Ghanaian armed forces, for example, to develop a special operations brigade to boost their and other law enforcement agencies' readiness to deal with a terror attack should it occur, or indeed any other type of crisis. So we're working with Ghana to help ensure that they remain this peaceful country in a region that is beset by the problems that you just talk about. The situation in Boko is highly complicated, and I don't want to get myself into hot water by trying to suggest what might be a way out of it. The problem's been going on for decades, and people who are far more informed than I am have been trying for decades to try to realise a long-term solution for those set of issues. I do have a worry that jihadists outside of Ghana might see some of the tensions within Ghana potentially as opportunities, right, and use them to their own ends. So for that reason, amongst others, the violence and the death, the injuries that have already been caused, I hope that we see an end to the violence, to the conflict, the disagreements in Boko as soon as possible. I wish the mediators Godspeed and hope that they will find that long-term solution. And I send some sincere condolences to everybody who's been affected already.
Let's talk about the Commonwealth and the 56 nations involved, including the UK and Ghana. Recently, there was some good news for us because the Secretary General, the incoming Secretary General, is our very own Foreign Affairs Minister, Shirley Ayoko-Botry. Before we delve into other matters related to the Commonwealth, what is your reaction to that? I know you're all for women's empowerment and all that. What was your reaction?
I am all for women's empowerment, and I wholeheartedly congratulate Minister Botry on her election to the post. She's done a super job to get there. It's been a pleasure working with her in her current incarnation as Foreign Affairs Minister, and I'm very much looking forward to working with her as Secretary General as well. I fully congratulate Ghana and Minister Botry on her appointment.
And speaking of women's empowerment, I'll come back to the Commonwealth. for the first time, we have a female Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves. I mean, that must have also got you excited.
Very, yeah, very. I'm definitely not alone in being very proud to have watched the first female Chancellor in 800 years of that post stand up and deliver her first budget last week. Yeah,
wow,
a really important moment.
I didn't know it was like 8 centuries.
Yeah.
That must be a very thick glass ceiling that has fallen. But congratulations to her, of course, and we wish her the very best.
And we hope that there'll be many more of such firsts, and that then those women in positions such as that will become less remarkable, both in the UK and here in Ghana and around the world.
I mean, you've had female prime ministers and all of that, so I guess it was about time, especially with Margaret Thatcher standing out as the Iron Lady. But let's come back to the Commonwealth in respect of that call by Commonwealth leaders in recent times, especially from Africa, that there must be some reparation for the evils of imperialism, colonialism, and all that. I listened to PM Keir Starmer speak about it. Some African leaders did not like his rhetoric and all of that. What are your takeaways from the different positions, and what do you think is a viable way forward?
So the slave trade was abhorrent. That is undeniable, and people are still living with the impacts of that today. The position of the British government is that rather than try to make cash transfers to form reparations for what's happened in the past, instead we'll look at what the needs are now and work with countries on the most pressing issues today. For example, around economic growth, around the need to tackle climate change, and to deal with the impacts of those countries who are already suffering from the effects of climate change. It's the approach that I've taken here in Ghana as well. So I do celebrate the modern and forward-looking partnership that we have. I also feel it's very important for me to learn from and be respectful of the past. So it was an absolute privilege, to use that word again, earlier this year to have been invited to Kumasi for the commemoration of the end of the Anglo-Ashanti War, 150 years since the end of that war. It was a privilege again to have been present when objects that were looted from Kumasi were returned 150 years after they were taken, thanks to the really strong connection, the partnership between Ghanaian institutions and British institutions. In 2007, former Prime Minister Tony Blair was in Ghana when he expressed his deep regret for slavery and the impacts of slavery on the people who are affected both then and now. And it's by looking forward and addressing the issues of today that my government believes we can best address it.
And just to chip in, one thing I found curious about the return of the artifacts, it is temporary, but I guess those are conversations that can be had for the future. But let's look at the UK in terms of creating that pro-economic growth environment. It's been touted in recent times. How will that play out, especially considering Ghana-UK relations? Oftentimes you would have African countries say, we're not asking for handouts, we're asking for a level playing field so that we can also rub shoulders with you, we can make something out of our exports and develop our own countries. What does this mean for the UK?
Absolutely. So economic growth is, as I mentioned earlier, is the top priority of the new British government, the incoming British government, and we saw that in Rachel Reeves' budget last week. Not long after coming into office, our government hosted an investment summit that saw £63 billion of investments committed for the UK, which really demonstrates that confidence in the UK as a place to do business. Our economic relationship with Ghana is one of the most important pillars of our relationship. Bilateral trade currently stands at around £1.4 billion, and the majority of that is exports from Ghana to the UK. We want to see that grow. We want to see it grow in both directions. There's a trade partnership agreement that should be supporting that growth in bilateral trade. People aren't making as much use of it yet as they could be. It provides for duty-free, quota-free export of everything apart from arms and ammunition from Ghana to the UK. And Ghanaians can import duty-free and quota-free many products, including machinery, including manufacturing equipment, chemicals, metals, all these products that can help with the growth of that value-added part of the economy here in Ghana. So there's lots more that we can do with that. And we have in common with the government of Ghana that commitment to building the private sector, to building the relationships between the private sectors in our two countries, and with that seeing the jobs come through and seeing the economic growth come through in both of our countries.
Are you signaling then that Rachel Reeves' budget will mean anything different for Africa, so to speak? Or let me be more specific, Ghana, in terms of how the dealings operate on the trade level? Is there going to be anything different?
So our Foreign Secretary has made clear that he sees all of us as his officials, his international network. He sees us as the international arm of that British government commitment to economic growth.
Right.
So everything that we do, he's asked us to take an economic growth lens to it. What that means for Ghana is it's building on very much what we have been doing already. As you said earlier in the conversation, Ghana doesn't want to be a recipient of aid, it wants to be a partner when it comes to economic growth. So it's very much building on the sorts of relationships that we have with government of Ghana, helping to develop investor framework policies, for example, helping to create the conditions that investors want to see in order for them to be comfortable investing in projects here in the country. The work that we do on health, on education here in Ghana, that's about creating a healthy, strong workforce that are going to be ready to take on that mantle and deliver that economic growth that's going to make Ghana even more of an important economic commercial partner for the UK in years to come.
Let's segue back to climate change briefly, because it's one of the key areas of collaboration between the UK and the rest of the Commonwealth, especially those of us here in Africa, because we're in the tropics. This place is pretty warm. We feel the effects of climate change, global warming more. What is being done? What can be done? And pardon me if I go back to the bit about reparations, not because it is reparations, so to speak, but because in the past, in the COPs, COP26, COP27 and all of that, there's been talk about countries like the UK, France, supporting countries in Africa to deal better with climate change financially. What is the status of that, and what is the plan moving forward?
First up, I think what you say about the effects of climate change in Ghana, in this region, is a really important point. For those people who are still saying that climate change doesn't exist, just look at the floods that we've seen in Ghana, look at the droughts that we've seen in Ghana, look at the impacts that it's having on cocoa growers, on oil palm growers, and then try and convince anybody that climate change isn't real. So we have supported with over £1 million efforts to help those farmers who've been affected by the droughts recently. We supported the efforts to help those Ghanaians who are affected by the floods as well. But over the long term, for example, we are working with cocoa farmers and oil palm farmers to help ensure they get better inputs to their businesses, so better stock, better chemicals, better advice, better financial services, and then to create a market for more sustainable forest products. We've also been working with the Ministry of Finance and supporting the creation of a climate finance division within the ministry, because it's still proving too difficult for countries to access the climate finance that is available. Ghana has been calling for a long time for a reform of the international financial architecture, including to make it easier for countries to access international climate finance. And that's an area where we're very much aligned and are working together as well.
And just to touch on visas one more time, there are some new processes that have been brought to bear as far as securing UK visas are concerned, e-visas. among others. That's also been topical. I just want to take you back a little bit. What's the latest on that? What should Ghanaians know in respect of that?
So from 2005, for people staying in the UK for a long period of time, they will need an e-visa rather than having the vignette in their passport. My best advice for them again is to go to the gov.uk web pages where there are really clear instructions for what people in that situation need to do.
Okay, so it's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that. And the reason for me saying go to the web page rather than me trying to tell you now is because I don't want to confuse everybody. The information on the website is very clear. It's very straightforward instructions to follow. So that's by far the best thing for people to do.
Going back to the visa granting rates, you mentioned about 7 out of 10, about 80% thereabouts. How consistent has this been, just out of curiosity?
That's a question to which I don't know the answer, I'm afraid. I can tell you that for now it's 7 out of 10, around 7 out of 10, so around 70%. And as I say, high rates of customer satisfaction. For student visas, it tends to be higher. And universities, I was just hearing from a colleague this morning actually, who was telling me how much universities and schools in the UK welcome their Ghanaian students because they tend to do really well. So that is perhaps one of the reasons that we're seeing those high acceptance rates, even higher acceptance rates for student visas. But
well,
trends
Ghanaians
over time
are known to be hard workers both in school and on the field, so no surprises in there. And let's hope that keeps up. But let's also talk about human rights issues. There are some of them in Ghana. In recent times, you may have heard of some protests and people getting arrested and all of that. But then there are also the issues of LGBTQ and all the other surrounding matters. There's a bill the president should have signed. Others say, well, he had his rights not to sign it, and it's still pending the court's decision, I mean the apex court. But on the front of human rights, what is the nexus? What collaborations exist? And how does the UK feel about human rights in Ghana, especially vis-a-vis the LGBTQI bill?
Yeah, so inclusion is hugely important for any society, and that means people being able to contribute fully to society, no matter what their gender, no matter what their belief system, their creed, their race, their sexual orientation. That's something that is a really strongly held value of the British government. The situation in Ghana, people in Ghana have different opinions from people in the UK, and I'm not going to sit here and tell Ghanaians what they should be thinking. We work with various institutions in Ghana on a really wide variety of human rights issues. For example, we've been in touch with the women's rights organisations over the many years that they have been fighting to get the Affirmative Action Bill through Parliament, and it's brilliant to see that they have finally succeeded and that act has come into law. We've also had a good working relationship with the organisations who are involved in revoking the death penalty here in Ghana as well. So on very many of these issues, there is strong alignment between the UK and Ghana.
And there's also Lord Collins, who recently was in town. I believe this was his first stop as far as becoming Minister for Africa. Some find the portfolio pretty interesting. There's a minister for the continent of Africa.
There's also a minister for the whole of the Middle East and North Africa. There's a minister for the whole of Asia and the Pacific. So it's not only Africa that gets one minister for an enormous variety of countries.
It's just out of curiosity. I mean, I've heard different comments. Oh, there's a minister for Africa. Okay. Hopefully it comes with a lot more, in terms of UK-Africa relations, especially for the Commonwealth, members of the Commonwealth. But during his visit, and I believe you were a part of it, there were interactions with the Vice President, who's flag bearer of the New Patriotic Party, the ruling party, also with former President John Dramani Mahama and Professor Jane Nana Opoku-Agyeman. What were your takeaways from those interactions ahead of the elections?
So I won't go into the detail, of course, of the private conversations, but the minister made points very similar to those that I've made now around not having a favoured outcome. But he was interested in what would be some of the key priorities for the two candidates should they come into office. He was interested in their take of the process, as we were then a few months out from the elections, what they were doing to ensure it would be a good process from their position as candidates. Obviously, there are many more actors with a role to play in that. So those were some of the things that we touched on during those conversations.
I see. Did the matter of peace emerge at some point?
Yeah, I mean, peaceful elections is one of the priorities for any election around the world. So we did touch on that, yeah. Both candidates were committed to doing what they could to engender peaceful elections, as I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear.
Not at all. Speaking of which, now you've served in Ghana for a while, and I hope you're going to be here for a while longer.
I hope so.
What are your hopes when it comes to serving in this role, in this capacity, and UK-Ghana relations moving forward?
That's a really big question. I mean, whoever succeeds me will, I'm sure, feel that same sense of privilege that I have felt in this role. The breadth of our relationship, from economy and commercial relationship through to the partnership that we have with defence and other security agencies, the partnerships that we have when it comes to human development, education, health, social inclusion, across that huge breadth of activity, there are enormous strengths, and the collaboration goes well beyond government. There are so many fantastic things happening that neither government has got any hand in. We might congratulate people, we might wish them well, but these things are happening regardless of us. And my hope is that all of that will continue to grow over the years to come, and that the UK will remain a part of Ghana's success story, and Ghana will remain a part of the UK's success story. I have no doubt that that is what's going to happen, and that is my strongest hope for the future.
And that's brilliant. I wish you the best on that journey.
Thank you.
Let's go back to the King's birthday party, and like I said, it's the 14th. It's going to be marked here on the 7th, which is today actually. But what is the plan? What's going to happen today? How is it going to be celebrated? And
so it'll be like,
what can we expect?
It will feel like a party. At least that's our hope.
It's going to be a party.
We are inviting many of our most important partners and stakeholders, and we hope that they will have a jolly good time. They will be enjoying food from the Ghana food movement, a fusion of Ghanaian and British food. They will be enjoying entertainment from young Ghanaian entertainers, musicians and dancers, the Fra Band and the DWP Dance Academy. And they will be treated to a fashion show by 3 young Ghanaian designers who are promoting sustainable fashion, so Cacao, Ajabeng and The Revival. So yeah, we're very much hoping people are going to come along, hopefully make some new friends, some new connections, and have a very good time celebrating His Majesty King Charles III and the strong and enduring partnership between the UK and Ghana.
There's something I love that I know you love too. Can you guess?
Is it chocolate?
See, chocolate.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I guess
I love chocolate. But what type do you like? Dark or
dark?
Milk chocolate?
Dark.
Why?
The one that's not too sweet. Yeah.
Okay, so you like it because it's not too sweet.
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
But it also has more health benefits.
Apparently so, and I wish I could, hand on heart, tell you that's why I like it, but no, I like it because it tastes good.
I see. You've told me about your taste in food and all of that, but a little bird whispered to me that you also have a wagashi kind of.
Oh, I do, yeah.
I mean, I hear in Tamale
great.
you had quite an experience with it.
Yeah, so whenever I head to the north, the team know that they need to build in a little extra time in our journeys, because we'll be on the lookout for the wagashi sellers at the side of the road, and we'll have to make a stop to get some, because it always tastes best straight out of the pan.
Yeah, fresh. I see. Curd milk fantasy.
Delicious.
Anyway, so that's it, but I'm going to wrap up with this last point, and I want you to answer me without thinking. When you think Ghanaian music, who comes to your mind first?
King Promise first. I'll tell you why.
Wow.
It's because my daughters still play Terminator. I mean, it's almost on repeat. Yeah. So if you come by the house at the weekend and look through the windows, you would see me and my daughters dancing to King Promise's Terminator around the house.
Have you ever met him? Have they ever met him?
I have met him actually. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We're birthday twins, as it turns out.
Oh,
Yeah.
no surprises in there. It's been refreshing talking to you today on the occasion of the King's birthday, which is a week away, but which we are celebrating today. Any final words?
No, just thank you for a great conversation. Nice meeting you.
It's been a pleasure. And this has been my engagement with Harriet Thompson, the UK's High Commissioner to Ghana. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I've got to know a thing or two, and if I ever have to play music for her, I'll know to look for King Promise, and specifically Terminator. Well, this is where we terminate the conversation. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. Thank you for watching.